The tonal system that forms the basis of Western art music is sometimes referred to as a major minor tonality because it's almost exclusively built upon only two scales, one known as the major mode and another known as the minor mode. Now, up until this point, we've exclusively studied the major scale, and we've used it as the foundation for an incredible number of ideas. The solfege syllables, key signatures, intervals, triads, just about anything we've studied pertaining to pitch, melody, or harmony can probably be traced back to our understanding of the major scale. But like I just mentioned, that's only half of our tonal system. So today, we're going to pull the curtain back to reveal the other half of Western tonality, and we'll learn all about minor scales and minor keys. The topics in today's video coincide with chapters 18 and 19 in our textbook, Music Fundamentals for Musical Theater by Christine Riley. So you might want to have the book open as we go. If you've got the book and something to take notes with, let's get right into the good stuff. We're going to begin our study of minor keys much in the same way that we approached the major side of things, by starting with the scale. In some of our earliest lessons together, we learned how the major scale is a group of 7 pitches, organized around one fundamental pitch, which we came to know as the tonic. This prime scale degree functions as a quasi-gravitational center around which the remaining 6 pitches orbit, each one expressing some degree of tension or consonance in relation to the tonic. While any pitch can serve as the tonic of the scale, once that pitch is established, the following 6 pitches are chosen according to a specific sequence of intervals. Beginning from our tonic pitch and ascending, each successive tone is either a minor second or a major second above its preceding tone. Every major scale follows the same pattern of half steps and whole steps, which we've long since memorized as whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. This sequence and the consequent intervals formed between the 7 pitches are precisely what gives the scale its character and quality, as well as what allows us to transpose the scale onto any other tonic pitch while still preserving its major sound. It may not surprise you then to learn that there's also a minor scale, which functions much in the same way. As before, we have a tonic pitch, which serves as the basis for our scale. And again, we also have 7 pitches in total within the scale. The difference, however, lies in that sequence of half steps and whole steps that we use to space out these 7 notes. The minor scale, beginning from tonic and ascending, follows the pattern whole, half, whole, whole, half, whole, whole. Now, once again, you can choose any pitch to be the tonic of your minor scale, and as long as you follow this particular sequence of half steps and whole steps, you'll end up with the same minor sound. Now, you might memorize this sequence and be done with it, confident in your ability to go forth and build a minor scale from any given pitch. But I like to consider these minor scales from another angle, one that's revealed by comparing them to the major scales we already know. Let's compare the D major scale and the D minor scale as an example. The major scale begins from D natural and ascends stepwise, requiring accidentals on F sharp and C sharp. Our D minor scale also begins from D natural, but owing to the differences in the order of half steps and whole steps, It only requires an accidental on B flat. When a major scale and a minor scale share the same tonic pitch, as they do here, they are considered to be parallel scales, or parallel keys. By building both scales from the same tonic and keeping them both in our view at the same time, we can find the differences between them pretty easily. 3 pitches differ on the 3rd, 6th, and 7th scale degrees, while the other 4 pitches are identical from one scale to the other. Apparently, these major and minor scales have more in common than they have not. This view also reveals another handy way to memorize a minor scale. By starting with the parallel major scale, you only need to lower the 3rd, 6th, and 7th scale degrees by a half step in order to arrive at your parallel minor scale. In our earlier studies, once we had wrapped our minds around major scales, it wasn't very long before we learned about key signatures and the circle of fifths. Just to refresh our memory, the basic idea was to construct a major scale from every possible tonic pitch, and then to organize those scales according to the number of sharps or flats that were required to build each scale. Those collections of accidentals became our key signatures. And since each key signature is unique to that particular scale, they also served as visual indicators for the tonic, scale, and key of the music at hand. As for the circle of fifths, well, that was simply a way to visualize these major keys, arranging those key signatures by sharps and flats and according to how many accidentals appeared in the key signature. This resulted in a ring of keys in which the tonic of each scale is a perfect fifth away from the adjacent key, hence the circle of fifths. So we've got a blueprint for how to handle these minor scales, with the goal of arriving at a similar collection of key signatures, which we can ultimately use to indicate each of the minor keys. And while we certainly could go about things in the same way as I just described, I'm going to take a different route to arrive at ultimately the same destination. Let's look again at our D minor example from before, with special attention to the resulting key signature. All we needed was a solitary accidental, B flat, to construct the scale. And as such, we can use a key signature with just B flat in it to indicate the key of D minor. Here's the thing though, we've seen this key signature before. This is the same key signature we used earlier to indicate the F major key and scale, shown here for comparison. Sure enough, each scale contains the exact same 7 pitches, and the only real difference lies in which of these 7 pitches is treated as the tonic, the pitch that functions as the tonal center for the rest of the scale. For every major key that we've already studied, there's a corresponding minor key that shares the same key signature. And let me repeat that for emphasis. For every major key that we have already studied, there is a corresponding minor key that shares the same key signature. When a minor and major scale share a common key signature, as they do here with F major and D minor, they're known as relative scales or relative keys. The tonic pitches of the relative major and minor scales are always separated by a minor third. Specifically, the minor key is a minor third below the major key. That's evidenced here, as D is a minor third lower than F. And as we transpose these scales to all of the different keys, that relationship of a minor third is preserved every time. So there's no need for us to take the long way around to building a circle of fifths for minor keys. We can just use the circle of fifths we already use for major keys. We only need to take the tonic pitch of each major key, draw a descending minor third from that tonic, and voila, you now have the relative minor key. And both will share the same key signature. Here we see our old friend, the circle of fifths, and we can now update it to include the relative minor keys, displayed here on the inside of the circle. Now that we've gotten a sense for the lay of the land when it comes to minor keys and minor scales, we're just about due to take an intermission. But before we do take that break, I want to just drive home the difference between today's two new terms, relative and parallel, because this is a common point of confusion when you're first introduced to minor keys. Relative keys share a key signature, but differ in their tonic pitch. Parallel keys share a common tonic pitch between them, but they differ in their key signature. These two terms are nothing more than a couple of ways to focus on the relationship of a minor key to a major key. And to help demonstrate the difference, here are the three scales we've used so far today, with the relationships labeled as either parallel or relative. And with that out of the way, now's a great time to take a break. So feel free to hit pause on the next screen and go grab some water, stretch your legs, and eat a few orange slices. When you're feeling ready to go on, we've got more knowledge after the break. The minor scale that we've just been discussing is also better known as the natural minor scale. And although it certainly opens the door to brand new melodies and harmonic possibilities, it also presents some particular challenges to composers who wish to compose music in a minor key. The first obstacle has to do with the whole step interval that we now find between scale degrees 7 and 1. Previously, with major keys, we had a half step there, and that close spacing between the leading tone and tonic caused a strong pull upwards. And as we learned even more recently, it's the presence of that leading tone in dominant triads and dominant seventh chords that causes the iconic sensation of tension and release in a dominant to tonic harmonic progression. Now, in our natural minor scale, without this half step between scale degrees 7 and 1, there's no leading tone, there's no upward tendency, and there's no harmonic tension, or at least not to the same degree as we had once before. So, what are we going to do to keep the minor scale from watering down all of these wonderful things that we used to get from the leading tone? Well, let's just raise that seventh scale degree and reinstate the leading tone. Easy enough. With the stroke of a single accidental, that raised seventh scale degree makes dominant chords once again possible, as well as a true leading tone that resolves upward by half step. This gives us our first variation on the natural minor scale, and we call this one the harmonic minor scale, since it resolves the all-important dominant chord harmony. Anytime you want to construct a harmonic minor scale, start by drawing the natural minor scale and then simply raise the seventh scale degree by a half step. The solution to our leading tone problem has an unfortunate consequence, however. If you have any experience with computer programming, then you're probably familiar with the sensation of, I fixed one thing, but I broke another thing. In this case, When we solved a harmonic problem by raising the seventh scale degree, we inadvertently created a melodic problem nearby. Take a look at the interval formed now between scale degrees 6 and 7. We no longer have either a half step or a whole step, but rather we now find an augmented second here. I know we've avoided a truly in-depth study of voice leading and part writing rules, but we have dabbled in the subjects previously whenever it's relevant. In this instance, one of the really big no-nos of writing melodies tells us that augmented and diminished intervals should be avoided as much as possible, such as this augmented second. The conventional thinking behind this rule is that an augmented second is an unstable and ambiguous interval that dilutes the melodic integrity of a musical phrase. Now, I don't want to get tied down in an argument about whether or not augmented seconds have any business being in a good melody, because frankly, I don't think there's much of an argument to be had. Plenty of music outside of the European-centric traditions uses the augmented second to create beautiful melodies, especially in traditional music of the Middle East, India, and much of the Asian continent. In fact, even within the canon of Western art music, you don't have to dig very deep to find augmented seconds in the compositions of so-called masters like Bach, Beethoven, and Brahms. But I think all of this brings up a really important point for us to be constantly reminding ourselves of, which is that these conventions, which ultimately do form the foundation for much of the music that we study and perform in musical theater, these conventions were commonplace for a narrow period of time, roughly 1650 to 1800, and in a very narrow part of the world, namely Europe. Now, what I think most music theorists would agree on, though, is that an augmented second does have an incredibly distinct identity, and depending on the music you're composing, that distinctiveness could be unidiomatic to the musical style at hand. That statement feels somehow less controversial to me, so let's just say that if we were to use the harmonic minor scale as the basis for writing minor key melodies, then we would occasionally end up with an augmented second. And for now, we want to find a way to avoid that interval. Fortunately, there is another easy fix for this. If we simply raise the sixth scale degree now by a half step, well, that eliminates the augmented second. And since the interval between the fifth and sixth scale degree was previously a half step, we won't be running into the same issue of creating another unwanted interval further upstream. This gives us the second variation of the minor scale, and we refer to this one as the melodic minor scale, since it alleviates the melodic problem of an augmented second. There's an interesting wrinkle to this solution, though. Melodically speaking, we only need the raised seventh scale degree to serve as a leading tone when the melody is ascending, as it moves from T to Do. When your melody is descending, however, the seventh scale degree doesn't function as a leading tone anymore, since it no longer leads upwards to Do. As long as we're heading down the scale, we can use the lowered seventh scale degree from the natural minor scale. And since we don't need to raise the seventh scale degree when descending, that also eliminates the need to raise the sixth scale degree. So all that is to say, when you go about constructing a melodic minor scale, start by drawing the natural minor scale up and down, and raise the sixth and the seventh scale degree on the ascending side only. On the descending side, just leave the sixth and seventh scale degrees lowered as they appear in the natural minor scale. In this regard, the melodic minor scale is unique among the four scales that we've learned so far because it changes whether you are ascending or descending. All right, that's a wrap on today's episode. We started out by learning about the natural minor scale, and we compared it to the major scale through the frames of parallel and relative connections. That led us to the understanding that for every major key that we've already studied, there is a related minor key that shares the same key signature. And those relative major and minor keys are always a minor third apart from one another. After the intermission, we looked at two distinct problems with the natural minor scale, one harmonic and another melodic in nature. The resolution of those obstacles gave rise to two variations on the natural minor scale, which we conveniently labeled as the harmonic minor scale and the melodic minor scale. Now, in next week's video, we'll pick right back up with a look at sight singing in minor keys with solfege syllables. And we'll also explore some common harmonic progressions in minor keys. We'll also spend a little time practicing SATB chord analysis once again, as we've introduced seventh chords and minor keys in the time since we last practiced four-part harmonic analysis together. So until next time, thanks for watching, and be kind to each other.